how does God speak? Well, for Moses, God spoke from a burning bush. Moses is out in the wilderness. Fire was not uncommon because lightning would strike. The uncommon thing was that Moses watched that bush and it was on fire, but it was not being consumed. And so he turned aside to see that, and God spoke to him from the bush. Later, he was on Mount Sinai, and God spoke to him through thunder and smoke. But a word of caution, don't wait for a like experience. Elijah, great king, stood on the mountain, challenged all of the prophets of Baal. They prayed all day for fire to fall and consume their sacrifice, and old Elijah stood by and made fun of him. Maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's just hard of hearing today. And they shouted, they cut themselves. Close of the day, he prayed to the Lord, poured water on his sacrifice until it ran and unsealed Ahab's. I can see him with water scarce it was, and there's that dumb preacher pouring it out on the ground. But he soaked the sacrifice and asked God, and fire fell from heaven, consumed the sacrifice, licked up the water in the trench he dug around. Such a victory, the people began to cry out, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." And the great revival there, Jezebel said, "I'll kill him," because he killed the prophets of Baal. A great victory for God. But Jezebel, with one word, "I'll get him before the sun goes down tomorrow." And he fled. And he mouthed to God, "Just take me on. I'm the only one left." Came night, spent the night out there, and God fed him. And then took him along for about 40 days out there. And then God spoke to him. He said, "Go stand on the mountain." And then there was a strong wind that rent the rocks. But the Lord was not in the wind. There was an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. There was fire, but God didn't speak out of the fire. But then a still small voice. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah poor mouthed the Lord again. He said, "I'm the only one left." "Elijah, I have 7,000 people, prophets who do not bow the knee to Baal. Now you get up from here, and I want you to go back, and I want you to go through Damascus, because I want you to anoint Hazael, king of Syria. And I want you to go on to Israel, up in Samaria, and I want you to anoint Jehu, king. And I have all of these people. You're not the only one. In other words, don't bother me anymore with that poor mouth you're getting." So God can speak to us. He can speak to us out of the wind. He can speak in a still small voice, as He did, but a word of warning. God will never speak to you in that still small voice or any other way words that will violate His nature and character, nor contradict His written word. These preachers that are always saying, "God told me," you better kind of raise a little flag and be sure that they're not hearing their own message or Satan's message, because God will not violate His character and nature, and He will not give you any message that will contradict what's written in this word. I hope you have that. Then he speaks to us in a lot of ways. One of my favorite passages is in Job, and I would like for you to just listen to me. You know, Job had been afflicted, and He had these guys that were going to comfort him. Lord, Job could have done without them. But here's what God may speak in one way or in another. Yet man does not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, God speaks. That's not always the time you have a dream that God is saying, but then again, when deep sleep falls upon men, while slumbering on their beds, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction in order to turn man from his deed, conceit, pride from man. All right? So he speaks to us in a dream, or he wakes up. He'd wake up in the middle of the night with a thought, and it may have been an answer to something you've been struggling with a long time. It may have been a sudden light shone on a conflict that you're having in life. So God speaks that way. And then he keeps back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. That time in life when you were at death's door. And you don't know how it happened, but suddenly that 18-wheeler missed you. And you missed hitting it. And there's no rational accounting for the miracle of God. God speaks to us like that. He warns us. Man is also chastened with pain on his bed, and with strong pain in many of his bones, so that his life abhors bread, and his soul succulent food. His flesh wastes away from sight, and the bones stick out, which once were not seen. Those times of illness, if we will listen, God is saying something to us in that. And we need to listen to him. Yet his soul draws near the pit and his life to the executioner. I mean, you know, the closer we get to death, the more we ought to be in tune with God. And last of all, if there is a messenger for him, a mediator, one among 1,000, to show him that God is upright. God speaks to you often through one or more of his servants. It's always good to be in touch with godly people that love you. Love you enough to be a Nathan and tell you when you're wrong. Love you enough to encourage you when you have committed wrong and help you out of the situation. God uses people. But again, in that framework now, remember that God is never going to tell you something that conflicts with his written word. I had a friend who was a successful businessman. He was a world champion team roper. He was married to a lovely lady, had a wonderful family, was respected in the community and church, and he turned to a sweet young thing, and he told me that he just knew that it was right because it felt so right. He left his wife, but then he got sick, and the sweet young thing left him. And guess who took care of him through a long period of illness? You guessed it. You see, God does not okay wrongdoing, no matter how we feel about it. We're to be guided by God's character, nature, his example, and his word. And if you suddenly feel you've gotten a message from God, the first thing you ought to do is to go look in his word and see if it conflicts with the word. So God speaks to us in all these different ways. He speaks to us through people too. I have people through 60 years of ministry. I've always had at least one person. If I need some help. I go to that person. My pastor. And now I've got a dear friend in DeRidder. He had a ship shot out from under him during World War II. But a great man of God. A layperson, he spent his working career overhauling machines in a paper mill. But I tell you, Teddy Eves, I lean on him. And he leans on me. But you need one or more people that can hold you accountable, monitors and mentors you, helps you to walk the good life. Okay? We got some time. Let me talk about praying for the church. The Lord's Prayer, we pray that His kingdom might rule, that His name might be hallowed. We need to pray for harmony in the church. And if you've been in a worship service this morning, you have